Analysis of death is not for the sake of becoming fearful, but to appreciate this precious lifetime. The Dalai Lama. Welcome back to The Cellar. In a lot of ways, space may be the last true frontier of exploration for mankind. We as humans fascinate over the endless possibilities. Cinema itself has become that canvas for our imagination. With so many movies and TV series focusing in on all the joys and fears we have with the universe and beyond. Over the decades, numerous people have been sent into the great abyss just beyond Earth's atmosphere, with many returning to tell their stories and share their experiences. But space itself is an unforgiving domain, and sometimes it chews those that dare explore it up and sends them crashing back down to the Earth below. This is the story of the Soyuz 11 space mission. The Soyuz 7K-OKS spacecraft was launched on June 6, 1971, from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in the Central Kazakh Soviet Socialist Republic. The crew, Georgy Dobrovolsky, Vladislav Volkov, and Viktor Patsayev, were the first and only crew to ever board the world's first space station, the Salyut 1. They would arrive at the space station on June 7, 1971, and it would take them 3 hours and 19 minutes to dock successfully with the space station. The crew would then enter the space station only to discover a smoky and burnt-out atmosphere. They would immediately proceed to get to work after replacing part of the ventilation system. They spent the next day back in their space shuttle until the air was clear. Over the course of the next 22 days, the crew would remain productive, exercising twice a day on the treadmill while performing live television broadcasts from the space station. On day 11, a fire broke out, but was quickly extinguished. After the fire, it was debated briefly as to whether or not the crew should abandon the rest of the mission, but things would settle down and the crew would proceed to complete their 22-day expedition. On June 29, 1971, the three cosmonauts began loading scientific specimens, tapes, and other gear into the Soyuz 11. They would undock at 1828 Greenwich Mean Time. From there, the Soyuz 11 flew co-orbit for a while before it retro-fired at 22:35 Greenwich Mean Time. Just to give some context, retro-fired is when a rocket on a spacecraft or an aircraft is fired in the opposite direction to the direction in which the vehicle is traveling in order to slow it down. This was done in preparation for re-entry. Before re-entering Earth's atmosphere, the work compartment and the service modules were jettisoned at around 22:47 Greenwich Mean Time. Just after this occurred, all radio communications abruptly ended. A full 25 minutes would go by. During this time, the Soyuz 11's automatic systems would proceed to land the craft at 23:16:52 Greenwich Mean Time. It landed about 90 kilometers or 56 miles southwest of Karazal in Kazakhstan. The landing appeared to have gone as normal as possible, but sadly, when the recovery team arrived on scene and proceeded to open the capsule of the Soyuz 11, they would discover all three cosmonauts to have perished. After 570 hours and 383 orbits, the crew had somehow not survived their trip back home. Upon inspection of the capsule, all three men were found motionless, with dark blue patches on their faces and trails of blood from their noses and ears. One of the men's bodies was found to still be warm, and CPR was performed to try and revive him. But after numerous attempts, the crew was pronounced dead, with the cause of death appearing to be suffocation. Autopsies would soon be performed at the Burdenko Military Hospital. There, they found that the cause of death for the cosmonauts was hemorrhaging of the blood vessels in their brains. This occurred as a result of exposure to a vacuum environment, which caused the oxygen and nitrogen within their bloodstreams to begin to bubble and rupture vessels. So what led to such a horrible fate? Well, the fault was ultimately traced to a breathing ventilation valve. This valve was located between the orbital module and the descent module. It is believed that the valve had been knocked open when the descent module was separated from the service module. This occurred at around 12 minutes and 3 seconds after the retro fire. The two modules were held together by explosive bolts that were designed to fire sequentially, but were found to have ultimately fired at the same time. This occurrence caused the internal mechanism of the pressure equalization valve to loosen a seal which allowed for automatic adjustments of the cabin's pressure. The valve opened up at an altitude of 168 kilometers or 104 miles, and the immediate loss of pressure was fatal in less than a minute. In fact, one of the cosmonauts was fitted with biomedical sensors, and the data showed that he went into cardiac arrest within 40 seconds. Another sad detail in this story was the discovery of Viktor Patsayev's body, which was found positioned near the valve. It is believed that he made a desperate attempt to block or close the valve prior to losing consciousness. After all was said and done, the cosmonauts were given a large state funeral and buried in the Kremlin Wall necropolis in the Red Square of Moscow. The men were also each posthumously awarded the Hero of the Soviet Union Medal. In the aftermath of this disaster, the Soyuz spacecraft would go through an extensive redesign, being set to now only carry 2 cosmonauts. This extra room now meant that the crew could wear the so-called spacesuits during launch and landing to avoid a repeat of what had transpired to the Soyuz 11 crew. To this very day, the 3 crew members of Soyuz 11 are the only humans to have died in the dark depths of space. It was October 25th, 1902. 20-year-old Stanton Walker decided to go watch an amateur baseball game in Morristown, Ohio. As you can imagine, the day was going about as normal as possible. The game was taking place, the sun was shining, and Stanton was enjoying the game while sitting in between 2 friends named Frank Hyde and Leroy Wilson. As the day continued on, Frank Hyde asked Leroy Wilson to borrow his pocket knife. Frank was keeping score of the game, and his pencil had become dull. Leroy would proceed to pass his knife down, and Frank sharpened his pencil and proceeded to continue scoring the baseball game. At some point, he went to pass the knife back down to Leroy. He would first hand the knife to Stanton, but before Stanton was able to hand the knife back over to Leroy, tragedy would strike. A foul ball would be hit straight into the stands, and it proceeded straight into where Stanton Walker was seated. The ball would hit Stanton just right and cause the knife he was holding to plunge straight into his chest. The blade passed right between 2 ribs and severed the artery that sits just below the heart. The men sitting around Stan immediately asked if he was okay, and Stanton stated, "I believe so." But within only a handful of seconds, it became apparent that Stanton Walker was in a dire situation. With the artery severed, the wound would begin to bleed profusely. Stanton would attempt to get up with his friends to go get help, but from all reports, he had no chance of getting any kind of help in time. He would bleed out in only a couple of minutes, resulting in one of the most bizarre and unluckiest fates imaginable. Boris Segal was a 57-year-old Ukrainian-born American television and film director. Born in Yekaterinoslav, Ukrainian SSR, now known as Dnipropetrovsk, Ukraine, Boris Segal would eventually emigrate to the United States, where he would go on to attend the Yale School of Drama. Segal had many TV credits throughout his life, including directing episodes of The Twilight Zone, The Cat, Alfred Hitchcock Presents, Columbo, Peter Gunn, and The Man from U.N.C.L.E. He also directed the 1972 television adaptation of Percy MacKay's play The Scarecrow for PBS. He would go on to be nominated for 4 Primetime Emmy Awards for his direction of the miniseries Rich Man, Poor Man. In 1971, Boris would direct a film that I'm certain many people remember, the cult classic The Omega Man, which starred the late Charlton Heston in the lead role. Boris would go on to have 4 children with his first wife, Katie, Joe, and twins Jean and Liz Segal. His daughter Katie Segal would go on to have a prolific acting career, as many of you should know her as either Peg Bundy in Married with Children, or as Gemma Teller, the mother of Jax Teller in the Sons of Anarchy television series. It was May 22, 1981, and Boris Segal was busy filming aerial shots at the Timberline Lodge, which is located in Portland, Oregon. The lodge itself is a location that is very historic, as it was used for all the exterior shots in the filming of Stanley Kubrick's all-time classic film adaptation of Stephen King's book, The Shining. Boris was filming aerial shots for his newest production, the miniseries World War III. Boris was in a helicopter at the time and was primarily filming background scenes for the miniseries. After getting everything he needed for the day, the helicopter would soon touch down in the parking lot of the hotel. It is widely believed that Boris was extremely preoccupied in his own thoughts as he exited the helicopter. As he stepped out, he inadvertently turned the wrong way. He would then proceed to take a few steps forward, and tragedy would strike. Boris walked straight into the rear rotor blades of the helicopter. The blades would slice through Boris around his head, neck, and shoulders. In some reports, it states that he was partially decapitated. Those there to witness the horrific event would immediately jump into action. Boris would be rushed to a nearby hospital in Portland, where he would undergo emergency surgery for over 5 hours. He battled to survive, but tragically, the wounds he suffered were far too severe. He would later be pronounced dead. After Boris's tragic passing, director David Green would take over and complete directing duties on the TV miniseries World War III, while Boris would earn a posthumous Primetime Emmy Award nomination for his work on the Masada TV miniseries. Sadly, for all those that are fans of cinema, a talented man and father was lost on this day. It's tragic events like this one, alongside the loss of Heath Ledger or Anton Yelchin, that make me sit back and wonder what ultimately could have been. Thank you all for tuning in to another episode. If you enjoy the content, please hit that like and subscribe button. It helps the channel continue to grow. Also, you can check the description box below and find the link to my merch store. Tons of awesome designs, and the proceeds help fund the channel. I also just started a new membership tier for the channel. It's only $2.99 a month and comes with some pretty cool perks. So if that interests any of you, then please go check it out. Also, if you'd like to submit a real-life scary story that you would like featured on an episode on the channel, please do so using the email linked in the description box below. As always, I do all the research, writing, recording, and editing for the channel myself, so anything you do to support the channel is greatly appreciated. Until next time, I will see you all again as we head back into the cellar.